There is a reason why Scorpio sees what others cannot. It's not a trick of the eye, it's not a superstition, and it's certainly not an accident. It's a soul contract signed long before this lifetime began. You see, when the universe forged Scorpio, it didn't make a watcher, it made a witness, a gatekeeper, a guardian of sacred truths too heavy for the ordinary heart to carry. While the world rushes toward light and comfort, Scorpio is sent in the other direction, into the shadows, the ruins, the quiet places where truth has been buried under convenience. And what Scorpio finds there, it cannot be unseen. Because this vision, this piercing, soul-level perception is not something Scorpio learns. It is something Scorpio remembers, memories etched into the marrow, sensitivities burned into the DNA. Sight that pierces not just through masks, but through timelines, through karmic echoes, ancestral silence, and soul vibrations. And yet this gift is not wrapped in glory. It is not a crown, it is a burden. To see what others are afraid to acknowledge. To know what others pretend isn't real. To hold the mirror while others flinch. Scorpio doesn't look away, it never has, because it was never meant to, but what no one dares to ask is, what happens to the one who always sees? What happens to the soul who bears witness not just to joy and beauty, but to betrayal, to endings, to truths that crush illusions? That kind of vision doesn't come without a cost. It isolates, it wounds, it burns. And still Scorpio endures, because there's something ancient in this sign. Something that doesn't just want to see, it must see. Something that doesn't just observe pain, it transforms it. Something that doesn't just survive endings, it turns them into rebirth. This isn't about having intuition. This is about being a vessel for truth, even when that truth is unbearable. So if you're a Scorpio watching this, or if a Scorpio has ever looked at you like they already knew, it's because they did, but what they do with that knowing, that is the real story. And that's the journey we're about to take. A journey into the eyes of Scorpio. The ones that see the storm before it hits. The betrayal before it's spoken. The soul beneath the silence. Are you ready to step beyond the veil, to hear the truth most aren't ready to admit? To walk beside the one who sees through illusion and still chooses to love anyway? Then come with me. This is not just a zodiac sign. This is a spiritual assignment. This is Scorpio, and Scorpio sees everything. Part 1. Born with the veil, Scorpio's cosmic eyes. Some souls are born with their eyes wide shut. Scorpio is not one of them. Scorpio enters the world as if it has already seen it. It doesn't cry in confusion, it studies in silence. There's a stillness in Scorpio's gaze even as a child, a kind of ancient watching that unsettles some and fascinates others. And if you've ever looked into the eyes of a Scorpio, truly looked, you know exactly what I mean. It's not just a stare, it's a scan. It's as if Scorpio is reading something beneath your words, a part of you even you forgot was there. Many spiritual traditions speak of souls who are born with the veil, those who arrive in this life already tuned to a higher dimension, already seeing into the spirit world. Scorpio doesn't just wear that veil. Scorpio is the veil, the bridge between seen and unseen, the living threshold between what the world says is real and what the soul knows is true. And this isn't a matter of superstition. It's embedded in Scorpio's astrological DNA. Ruled by Pluto, the planet of death, transformation and revelation, Scorpio does not come to merely exist, it comes to perceive, to reveal, to awaken. This vision is not a talent, it's a frequency, one that pulses through Scorpio's emotional body like sonar, detecting the truth not by logic but by resonance. And because of this, Scorpio often knows things before they're said. Not because of evidence, but because of vibration. It walks into a room and feels the tension no one speaks of. It hears the laughter and senses the grief hiding underneath. It reads energy the way others read headlines. But here's what most people don't understand. This gift is not turned off. It's always on. Like a psychic antenna scanning every room, every word, every shift of tone Scorpio is absorbing. Always, and that can be exhausting. It's why Scorpio needs solitude. Why it sometimes withdraws, even from those it loves. Because seeing too much, feeling too deeply, holding the weight of what's hidden, that is not a casual experience. It's sacred labor. Scorpio does not merely see people, it feels them, it enters them. It merges with them on a frequency where nothing can hide, not desire, not betrayal, not fear, and often not even love. That's why Scorpio can be quiet at first. Observant, because what it's doing isn't small talk, it's scanning your soul. Some call it cold, others call it intimidating, but the truth is it's clarity, and Scorpio was born for clarity. When the world lies, Scorpio tells the truth. When others flinch, Scorpio stares. When most retreat from discomfort, Scorpio descends into it not to suffer but to see, to learn, to know. And in that knowing, Scorpio begins its sacred work, to feel, to purge, to transform, to hold a truth that burns and still not look away. Because when Scorpio sees something dark, it doesn't run. It asks, where does this lead? What needs to be healed? What needs to be born from this shadow? Scorpio was never meant to be a passive observer. It's the soul surgeon of the zodiac, sent not just to witness pain, but to pierce through it, to extract its wisdom. And that begins with the eyes. Eyes that see too much, eyes that remember too far back, eyes that were never closed to begin with. That's why Scorpio's sight is not just perception, it's prophecy. It doesn't just see what is, it sees what's coming. What's hiding, what's possible. This is the gaze of the phoenix, not just rising from ashes, but seeing through the fire even while it's still burning. And so the next time you feel the eyes of a Scorpio lingering on you, know this. They're not judging, they're not guessing, they're seeing. And what they see, they don't always say, but they never forget. Part 2, the gift nobody understands. To the world, it looks like Scorpio is simply too intense. Too quiet, too suspicious, too deep, too much. But what the world calls too much is actually a sacred gift, one that most people will never understand until they desperately need it. You see, Scorpio's perception doesn't stop at behavior. It cuts underneath words, past gestures, beyond body language. It hears the tone behind the tone. It feels the shiver behind the smile. And that ability to read energy, to see through facades, to know things without being told. It is not just intuition, it is survival. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio woman I once met, strong, poised, always calm. To most people, she was quiet, kind, mysterious, but one day she walked into a room full of laughter. People were smiling, drinking, hugging. She paused at the door, didn't say a word. But later she told me something was off. I could feel it in my spine. They were laughing too loud, like they were trying to cover something. She didn't say anything, she didn't accuse anyone, she just observed. And within days, the truth exploded, betrayals, lies. Hidden intentions finally came to light. No one believed her at first, but she already knew, not because she was paranoid, but because Scorpio's gift is wired to detect vibrational distortion, the subtle shifts in energy that happen before the mask slips, before the damage is done, before the betrayal is visible. Scorpio is the only sign that doesn't need proof to trust its vision, because the proof will come later, but the feeling always comes first. And this is the gift no one understands. While others rely on facts, Scorpio relies on frequency. While others second-guess themselves, Scorpio already knows. But what most don't see is what this gift costs. Because when you see things early, you suffer early. Scorpio feels the collapse of a relationship before the breakup. It mourns the trust before it's even broken. It sees the shift in someone's eyes and knows the love is dying before they ever say goodbye. This is not paranoia. This is prophecy, and prophecy is lonely. Who do you tell when you know something no one else is ready to hear? Who do you turn to when your gift makes you the first to feel the fallout? So Scorpio learns to carry the burden silently, to keep the knowing inside, to smile when it already sees the ending, to show up even when others still wear masks. It's not that Scorpio doesn't want to believe in the good. It's just that Scorpio can't ignore the truth. And while that makes it powerful, it also makes it tired, because when you are the first to see, you're often the last to be believed, and yet Scorpio keeps showing up, keeps watching, keeps knowing. Because even if the world doesn't understand this gift, even if it feels like a curse sometimes, even if it isolates, it also saves. It saves Scorpio from blind loyalty. It protects Scorpio from lies coated in sugar. It defends the soul from betrayal disguised as affection. That's the paradox of this gift. It's both armor and ache, blessing and burden, vision and exile, but Scorpio never turns it off because it can't. And deep down, Scorpio doesn't want to, because it knows that seeing the truth, even when no one else sees it, is still better than living a lie. So the next time a Scorpio tells you they just have a feeling, don't dismiss it. They're not trying to impress you, they're trying to protect you. They're not looking for drama, they're reading the storm before it hits, and that is the gift, the one nobody understands. Until it's too late, part 3. Isolation of the seer. There's a silence Scorpio knows. It isn't loneliness, it isn't sadness. It's something more ancient, more sacred, more dangerous. It's the silence that comes from seeing too much in a world that pretends nothing's happening. When your eyes pierce through illusion. It's when you can feel betrayal in the warmth of a hug. When you can sense the shift in someone's energy long before they speak the lie. You don't always get rewarded for your perception, you get punished for it. You see, people say they want truth until it shows up in a Scorpio body, until the mirror gets held too close, until the gaze becomes too revealing, until they realize they can't hide anymore. And what happens then? They retreat. They reject, they say you're imagining things. They call you too sensitive. They accuse you of overreacting, but what they're really saying is, please don't make me face myself, not yet. So Scorpio learns to carry what it sees alone. It becomes the confessor no one thanks, the energy reader no one listens to, the silent witness in the room full of denial. And over time, that weight begins to ache. Because even though Scorpio is strong enough to walk through fire, no one was ever meant to carry truth in isolation forever. Imagine being in a crowd, everyone laughing, drinking, moving on. But you feel the shadow in the corner. You sense the secret that's being passed in the glance. You hear the conversation beneath the conversation. It's like being in 2 dimensions at once. Scorpio doesn't live fully in the surface world, it can't. Because the underworld never stops whispering. It sees what others are not ready to admit. And that kind of seeing creates distance. Not because Scorpio wants to pull away, but because it has no choice. There's a part of Scorpio that's always watching, even when it's laughing, even when it's holding your hand, even when it's in love. There's a part of Scorpio that knows. And knowing, especially when you can't share it, is one of the most isolating experiences on Earth. That's why Scorpio values solitude not just as preference, but as medicine. In silence, Scorpio doesn't have to explain its knowing. It doesn't have to filter its depth. It doesn't have to hold its breath just to keep others comfortable. In solitude, Scorpio can finally breathe again, can finally rest from the constant pressure of pretending it doesn't see what it sees. But even that solitude comes at a cost, Because while the world praises positivity and comfort and good vibes only, Scorpio is left wondering, is there anyone who actually wants the truth? Is there anyone who sees like I do and isn't afraid? That's the true isolation, not physical distance, but energetic exile, being surrounded by people and still feeling alone. Not because no one's there, but because no one's real. And yet Scorpio stays. It doesn't abandon the world, it just watches from the edges, waits, observes, until one day someone looks back, really looks and doesn't flinch. That's when the walls crack. That's when Scorpio begins to trust. That's when the isolation breaks, not with noise, but with recognition. Because for Scorpio, connection doesn't happen through words. It happens through soul vibration, through shared silence, through unspoken understanding, and until that frequency is matched. Scorpio walks alone, but never broken, never bitter, just quiet, like a flame behind glass, waiting for someone who sees fire and knows not to run. Part 4: Phoenix in the Fire. There's something most people misunderstand about Scorpio. They think the transformation comes after the pain, after the heartbreak, after the betrayal, after the loss. But for Scorpio, the transformation begins inside the fire. While others run from the flames, Scorpio walks directly into them. Not out of recklessness, but out of sacred instinct. Because deep within the Scorpio soul is a knowing. This fire is here to burn away what no longer serves me. Scorpio doesn't just survive collapse. It requires it because something ancient inside knows destruction is not the end. It's the beginning of becoming. Let me tell you a truth that most astrologers won't say. Scorpio doesn't fear death, not symbolic death, not emotional death, not ego death. In fact, it is the only sign that invites it, welcomes it, initiates it, and that's why Scorpio is the only one who can truly become the phoenix. Not in metaphor, not in myth, but in lived experience. This isn't poetic language. This is what Scorpio lives again and again. I once knew a Scorpio man, brilliant, magnetic, emotionally reserved. But life tore everything from him in a single year: his relationship, his business, his health, his sense of identity. Most people would have disappeared, crumbled, fallen into bitterness or blame, but not him. He went silent, not numb, not passive, focused. He withdrew into the shadows, not to escape, but to die properly, and months later he emerged. Not as the same man, as a new version of himself. Sharper, quieter, but more whole, more true. What changed? He didn't fix what broke, he let it all burn, and from those ashes he built again. Not on the foundation of what he once was, but on the truth of what he had become. This is the phoenix, and Scorpio carries its fire in the chest. It doesn't need others to understand it. It doesn't need applause, because it knows. The fire that breaks you is also the fire that reveals you. Every ending is a mirror. Every betrayal a catalyst. Every death a doorway. But you can only walk through it if you're willing to let go of who you were. And Scorpio is willing, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. That's why Scorpio's pain never goes to waste. It's alchemized, transformed, reforged into something powerful, something clear, focused, unshakable, while others cling to what's dying. Scorpio lets it rot, lets it collapse, and waits until the first spark of rebirth flickers beneath the ruin. Because Scorpio doesn't rise by accident, it rises by design, from pain, from loss, from a soul that refuses to stay buried in what is no longer true. And when it rises, it doesn't come back the same. It comes back closer to its essence. Stripped of illusion, cleaned by fire, armored by scars. This is why you cannot break a Scorpio permanently. You can wound them, you can burn them, but you cannot end them. They will always find a way back. Not out of pride, but out of purpose. Because the phoenix is not a myth, the phoenix is Scorpio. On its knees in the dark, surrounded by everything that's crumbling, and still holding the match, part 5. The energy decoder. Scorpio doesn't ask questions, it doesn't need to, because by the time the room is speaking, Scorpio already knows, you see, while others listen with their ears. Scorpio listens with its entire nervous system. Its skin picks up tension, its gut translates vibrations, its heart decodes silence. Scorpio is the zodiac's empathic lie detector, not because it wants to catch anyone, but because it was born tuned to a frequency below the words, where truth actually lives. You might smile at Scorpio, say all the right things, keep your tone calm, but if your energy says otherwise, Scorpio catches it instantly. This is what most people don't realize. Scorpio doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you broadcast. Every thought you bury, every feeling you hide, every fear you try to suppress. Scorpio feels it, not in theory, in body, in breath, in sensation. It might not tell you what it sees, but it sees. It might not call it out, but it won't unsee it. That's why Scorpio can sit across from you, say nothing at all, and still walk away knowing everything you tried to hide. It's not magic, it's energetic fluency. Scorpio is fluent in unsaid things, in micro-shifts, in the heaviness behind a light word, in the vibration behind a compliment. And because of this, Scorpio often feels like it's living in two realities. There's the one people pretend is happening, and then there's the one Scorpio knows is really happening. That gap between surface and soul is where Scorpio lives, but here's the challenge: you can't unfeel energy. You can't pretend you didn't notice the shift. You can't pretend you didn't feel the lie crawling under someone's sentence. So what does Scorpio do? It retreats. It protects its energy like a priest guards sacred ground. Because to absorb that much information all the time isn't just overwhelming, it's dangerous if not managed. Scorpio doesn't avoid people because it's antisocial. It avoids environments that feel energetically unclean. It avoids fake smiles. It avoids social games. It avoids rooms where people wear masks made of good intentions but blade toxic agendas, because Scorpio's system feels it all. That's why when a Scorpio says, "something's off," believe them, they might not have proof, but they don't need it. They feel the distortion, they hear the frequency shift, they sense the storm before the cloud. This ability to read people, to feel energy, is a gift that Scorpio didn't ask for, but it's one they were given to protect the soul, not just their own, but the souls of others. That's why Scorpio often sees you more clearly than you see yourself. They know when you're lying to them, but more painfully. They know when you're lying to yourself, and that's when Scorpio has to make a sacred choice, say what they see, or let you keep living in the illusion. They won't always tell you, not because they're afraid, but because they respect energy. Because truth to Scorpio is sacred, not casual. And if they do tell you what they feel, know this: they're not guessing, they're translating a vibration you didn't even realize you were sending. Scorpio doesn't just read energy. Scorpio is the decoder of truth. Part 6: Ancestral Memory and Karmic Echoes. Some signs look forward, others look around. But Scorpio looks back, way back, not just into childhood, not just into trauma, but into something far more ancient. The pain that didn't begin with you, because Scorpio doesn't just carry its own wounds. It carries the echoes of the bloodline, the residue of unfinished stories, the vibrations of unresolved karma. It is the psychic archaeologist of the zodiac, uncovering what generations before buried, not out of curiosity, but because the soul made a vow before birth: I will be the one who remembers. I will be the one who breaks the pattern. I will be the one who sets this energy free. That's why Scorpio often feels older than its age, why even as children they carry eyes that feel ancient. It's because they're not just processing this life, they're deciphering codes that were encrypted across lifetimes. And this isn't fantasy, it's energetic memory. Science calls it epigenetics, mystics call it soul lineage, but Scorpio simply feels it. That sadness that doesn't match your current life, that fear that shows up for no reason, that pattern that keeps repeating even though you've done all the work. Scorpio knows, this isn't mine. But I was born to carry it and clear it. That's why Scorpio's life often includes intense emotional initiations. Not as punishment, but as a sacred rite. Each heartbreak, each betrayal, each collapse is a karmic activation, unlocking memory not just of this life, but of those that came before. Scorpio dreams in symbols, feels in timelines, walks through the present while hearing whispers from the past. And these whispers are not random, they're invitations, clues, sacred messages from the soul's council saying, here is where your power was stolen. Here is the pain your grandmother never got to express. Here is the trauma your lineage tried to forget. And Scorpio answers, not by running, but by descending. It doesn't just cry, it investigates. It doesn't just hurt, it transforms. Because Scorpio was born not only with a piercing mind, but with a spiritual shovel designed to dig up what's been buried in shadow and alchemize it into power. It's not always pretty, it's rarely comfortable, but it's always real. That's why Scorpio's healing journey is never surface level. It goes to the root, to the bone, to the origin of the wound. And it doesn't stop until that wound becomes wisdom. Because Scorpio doesn't just heal itself, it heals the energetic DNA of everything it touches. Scorpio is the sign that takes the poison of the past and distills it into medicine. That's why in many spiritual traditions, the Scorpio archetype is linked to the shaman, the oracle, the shadow priest. These aren't titles, they're soul assignments. Scorpio didn't choose an easy path, it chose a powerful one. One that says, I will carry what others dare need. I will break what others couldn't face. I will free what others left behind. And in doing so, Scorpio doesn't just remember the pain. It rewrites the story. Because the karmic patterns stop where Scorpio stands. Part 7, Scorpio in Love, X-ray Intimacy. When Scorpio loves, it doesn't fall. It dives headfirst, heart open, soul exposed. But here's the truth most people can't handle. Scorpio doesn't love like the rest of the zodiac. It doesn't flirt, it merges. It doesn't skim the surface. It goes into you. Into your fears, your shame, your dreams you've never spoken aloud. Scorpio doesn't want the version of you show the world. It wants the part you hide, the part you protect, the part you're not even sure is lovable. Because Scorpio isn't drawn to perfection, it's drawn to truth. That's why when Scorpio loves you, you feel sane. Sometimes for the first time in your life. And that kind of seeing, it can be overwhelming. It can feel like a psychic striptease, where every mask you wear dissolves under the weight of Scorpio's gaze. Not because they're trying to disarm you, but because they can't help it. Their vision is X-ray, their love is surgical. They don't just hold your hand, they hold your soul. But this intensity comes with a price. Because while others love in phases, Scorpio loves in lifetimes. This is not affection, this is alchemy. And not everyone is ready to be loved that deeply. Some mistake it for control. Some fear the vulnerability it demands. Some run, not because Scorpio is dangerous, but because Scorpio reflects back everything they've tried to avoid in themselves. Because when you stand in front of a Scorpio in love, you're standing in front of your own mirror. And that mirror doesn't lie. Scorpio's love reveals where you're still guarded, where you don't trust, where you haven't forgiven, where you hide from your own greatness. And that level of intimacy, it's rare, it's raw, it's real, but it's not easy. Because Scorpio will ask for all of you, not through demand, but through vibration. They don't beg, they pull. And if you can't meet them in that depths, they'll feel it instantly, not with judgment, but with sorrow. Because Scorpio doesn't do almost. Scorpio doesn't do maybe. Scorpio does soul to soul, and if you can't go there, they won't force you, they'll withdraw, not out of bitterness, but out of integrity. Because Scorpio will never dilute their love just to make it easier to swallow. They would rather be alone in truth than accompanied in illusion. But when you can mate them, when you can undress your soul and say, "Here I am, all of me," Scorpio will give you a love that resurrects you. They will burn away your self-doubt, excavate your pain, bathe your wounds in loyalty, and guard your heart like it's holy. Because to Scorpio it is. They don't love for fun, they love to transform, to merge, to elevate, to remember together what eternity feels like. And when that kind of love happens, when the connection is mutual, equal, and raw, it becomes unbreakable, not because it's easy, but because it's real. Because Scorpio doesn't love the way others do. Scorpio loves like a vow. Scorpio loves like fire. Scorpio loves like truth. Part 8. Truth as a weapon, silence as power. Scorpio doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need to, because when Scorpio speaks, the room changes, but here's the deeper truth. Scorpio's real power isn't in what it says. It's in what it withholds. While the world races to explain, prove, justify, Scorpio watches, observes, waits, and in that silence 1,000 truths are already taking form. Scorpio's silence isn't passive. It's surgical, it's not avoidance, it's precision. Because Scorpio understands something most never will. Truth is not something you throw around. Truth is a blade. And only those with emotional mastery know how to use it. You see, Scorpio doesn't speak to be heard. It speaks to transform. And if the moment doesn't call for transformation, Scorpio remains still, unmoved, unshaken, unbothered by noise, because where others need to react, Scorpio chooses to respond if it responds at all. It's not apathy, it's power. You might think Scorpio is quiet because they don't care. But often they've already seen everything and are simply choosing not to destroy you with the truth they carry. Because Scorpio has levels of truth, layers of seeing. Not everything they know gets revealed. Why? Because truth in Scorpio's world is sacred. It's a soul technology. It can awaken or annihilate, and sometimes both. That's why a single sentence from Scorpio can change a relationship. Why a look from them can make someone feel exposed. Why their withdrawal feels like a spiritual exile. Because Scorpio's energy doesn't just speak. It judges without a word. And when Scorpio finally decides to speak, they don't throw punches. They drop bombs elegantly, precisely, devastatingly clear. There is no room to argue, no space to deflect, no fog left to hide in. The truth Scorpio delivers isn't brutal for the sake of cruelty. It's surgical truth meant to cut away the infection of lies. And sometimes that truth is delivered not with fire, but with a whisper, a sentence, or even worse, with silence. Because when Scorpio goes silent, you are no longer being warned, you are being disengaged. Scorpio doesn't slam doors. They vanish into the shadow they were born from, not to punish, but to protect their energy from further insult. Because Scorpio knows my presence is power, my silence is a choice, my truth is not owed to everyone. And so when Scorpio lets go, you don't feel closure, you feel a vacuum. A pull, an absence that echoes louder than any scream, and in that void you begin to realize. Scorpio wasn't just holding space for conversation, they were holding space for truth. And once that truth has been ignored, twisted, or disrespected, Scorpio closes the temple, quietly, fully, forever, because Scorpio knows how to disappear in full integrity. They don't need to explain, they don't need to defend. They just need to protect the sacred flame inside. That is their weapon, that is their power, not in yelling, not in proving, but in seeing everything. And saying only what matters, Part 9. The soul surgeon healing through depth, not words. Scorpio doesn't heal with advice, it heals with presence. Not the loud kind, not the performative kind, but the kind that walks into a room and makes silence feel like safety. Because Scorpio doesn't need to talk to understand you, it feels you, reads you, holds you energetically. Long before a single word is spoken, this is what makes Scorpio the soul surgeon of the zodiac. They don't fix the wound. They enter it not to make it disappear, but to honor it. Most people want healing to be fast, clean, comfortable. Scorpio knows better. Healing is messy, it's raw, it's sacred chaos. It's shaking in the dark with someone who won't abandon you when the pain gets ugly. And that is what Scorpio does. They don't flinch when you fall apart. They don't run when you bled truth. They don't judge when your mask cracks and your real self rises. Because they've been there, they've cracked, they've shattered, and they've rebuilt themselves from soul dust more times than they can count. So when you're unraveling, Scorpio doesn't panic. They hold space, still, solid, silent, but not absent. They know that true healing doesn't come from fixing. It comes from facing. And Scorpio holds the mirror no one else dares to, but it comes with a warning. You cannot fake it with Scorpio. You can't pretend you're okay. You can't bypass the pain. You can't cover grief with spiritual glitter and expect Scorpio to nod politely. They will wait you out, hold that space, until your soul gets tired of pretending and finally says, "Here I am." And then the healing begins. Scorpio won't tell you what to do. They won't promise you closure. But what they will do is stand in your shadows with you until you're no longer afraid of them. That's what makes them a healer. Not the words, not the rituals, but their ability to sit with darkness and not run. To see you in your most broken moment and still whisper you're not too much. Scorpio's healing doesn't come with flowers, it comes with fire. It burns away illusions. Leaves only truth, and from that truth, a new you is born. And when you look back, you'll realize Scorpio didn't save you. They reminded you that you could survive, that your wound wasn't the end, it was a doorway, and Scorpio stood beside it. Not with a key, but with a torch. Part 10, The Oracle Within, Premonitions, DIAMS, and Time-Bending Sight. Scorpio doesn't dream like other signs. They don't just see symbols, they decode blueprints. In sleep, Scorpio walks into timelines not yet lived. Whispers of futures forming behind the veil, because Scorpio doesn't dream in fantasy, it dreams in prophecy. Flashes, feelings. Faces that haven't arrived yet, but whose presence already brushes against the soul. This is not coincidence. This is the oracle within. You see, Scorpio's third eye isn't just open. It burns, it scans dimensions. It hears messages from the unconscious. It senses a truth that hasn't even happened yet, but is already moving toward them. And the most astonishing part, Scorpio doesn't always know how they know, they just do. They get a chill when the air hasn't shifted, a weight in the chest when something's coming, a dream that turns out to be a warning, or a confirmation, or a soul contract echoing through time. There is no linear time for Scorpio's perception. It lives slightly ahead of the moment, just far enough to feel the ripple before the stone hits the water. This is why people often say, "I didn't believe them, but they were right. They warned me and I ignored it. I should have listened." Because Scorpio doesn't guess, it receives, sometimes through dreams, sometimes through synchronicity, sometimes through an inner vibration that can't be explained, only obeyed. This is why many Scorpio placements are drawn to the occult, to divination, to the mysteries of time, not to control fate, but to honor what already lives beneath it. Scorpio is not just intuitive, it's precognitive. It doesn't just sense what you're hiding now. It feels the direction your soul is headed, even when you can't see it yet. But here's the painful part: most people aren't ready for this kind of seeing. They call it paranoia. They call it dark. They say Scorpio is too heavy, too intense, too obsessed with shadow. But what they don't understand is that Scorpio walks with one foot in this world and one in the next. And when you walk like that, you can't not feel the shift. You can't not see the storm coming. You can't not feel the karmic weight of choices being made. So Scorpio learns to live in layers. They nod politely when others call it a hunch. They act calm when the soul is ringing alarms. They try to smile when they already feel what's about to break. And when it finally happens, Scorpio isn't surprised, just saddened. Because they didn't want to be right, they wanted to be wrong. They wanted the betrayal to be a misunderstanding. They wanted the energy shift to be a fluke. They wanted the dream to be symbolic, not literal, but the oracle within doesn't lie. And Scorpio carries that oracle in their bones. This is not ego, this is service, because whether or not the world is ready to hear it, Scorpio's soul still delivers the message. It speaks in silence, in dreams, in chills, in knowing. And that knowing, it's not for glory, it's for guidance. So when a Scorpio says, "I don't know why, but I just feel this is coming," stop, listen, honor the oracle, because in that moment, they are not guessing, they are translating time, bending the veil, delivering truths, before the world is ready for it. Part 11. Legacy of the Sacred Flame: Scorpio's divine role in collective awakening. Scorpio was never born just to live, it was born to ignite, to disturb the false peace, to tear down illusions, to burn through the shadows no one else dares to face. This sign does not walk the earth gently, it walks with a flame, one that has been passed down through lifetimes, a sacred fire, an eternal torch, not for destruction, but for awakening. Because when Scorpio enters your life, it doesn't just bring presence, it brings revelation, and that revelation can feel like chaos, like intensity, like everything you once believed starting to collapse. But Scorpio isn't the storm, it's the mirror that shows you the storm was already there. It didn't create the fire, it just lit the match you were too afraid to strike. That is the legacy Scorpio carries, not to comfort you, not to rescue you, but to remind your soul of who it came here to become. And in doing so, Scorpio triggers, it awakens buried pain, it stirs dormant truth. It pulls the mask off your smile and asks, "Now who are you really?" This is why Scorpio is often misunderstood, feared, villainized, because its energy doesn't coddle, it confronts. But here's the sacred truth few acknowledge. Scorpio doesn't do this for power, it does it for liberation. Because only when you face the real can you become the whole. Only when you walk through your own death of identity, ego, illusion, can you be reborn into purpose. And Scorpio is the guide for that journey, not the smiling angel who holds your hand and tells you you're fine, but the shadow priest, the soul midwife, the one who says, "This will hurt, this will shake everything. But when it's over, you will finally be you." That is the divine role Scorpio plays in the collective to burn away what is false, in people, in systems, in culture, so that truth can finally stand in the open. That's why Scorpio appears during global breakdowns, during spiritual awakenings, during moments when the veil thins and the world can no longer pretend, because Scorpio is the initiator of transformation. Where others maintain the illusions, Scorpio dismantles it where others decorate the surface. Scorpio digs beneath it where others silence truth for comfort. Scorpio erupts it for healing, and this isn't ego, it's assignment. Scorpio didn't ask to carry this flame, it was born with it. Etched in its soul's contract, sealed with cosmic fire, and that flame, it doesn't dim, even when Scorpio is betrayed, even when it walks alone. Even when the world misunderstands the very thing it came to offer, because Scorpio doesn't need recognition, it needs alignment. It needs to stay true to the mission, to wake up the dead parts of the world, starting with the soul. This is the legacy of Scorpio, to walk the path no one else dares, and return not with applause, but with clarity to hold the sacred flame, not above the world, but within it, burning through lies, illuminating the real, and offering rebirth to anyone brave enough to face themselves. That's not just power, that's divine service, and Scorpio serves, even when it burns. Part 12, Final Resurrection, Why Scorpio Rises Stronger Every Time. Most people fear the fall, Scorpio embraces it. Most people dread losing everything, Scorpio expects it and transforms through it. Because Scorpio is not just the sign of death. It is the master of resurrection, not once, not twice, but as many times as life demands. You see, every Scorpio walks with a secret code stitched into their soul. I was born to be destroyed, so I could remember I am indestructible. That's why Scorpio can lose what others cling to: status, love, health, reputation, and still emerge more powerful. Because Scorpio understands the sacred paradox, you don't find yourself by holding on, you find yourself by letting go. And Scorpio lets go with fire. It burns through identity, it burns through the old self. It burns through everything that no longer resonates with the truth. And what's left? Clarity, conviction, a version of self no one can ever take away. That is the final resurrection, not just surviving pain, but becoming sovereign within it. Not just enduring endings, but using them as sacred fuel to evolve. There's something in Scorpio that no collapse can reach, something buried deeper than fear, deeper than shame, deeper than death, its soul memory. It's the knowing that no matter what is stripped away, what remains is eternal. So when others ask, how are you still standing? How did you come back from that? How are you not bitter after everything? Scorpio smiles quietly. Because the answer isn't logical, it's spiritual. They didn't survive by chance. They chose to return again and again, each time stronger, each time clearer, each time more aligned with their true essence. And this is the difference between Scorpio and the rest. Others rebuild to get back what they lost. Scorpio rebuilds to become who they were meant to be all along. That's why every betrayal becomes a threshold. Every loss becomes an initiation. Every descent becomes a birth canal. Scorpio doesn't fear being shattered because they know how to put themselves back together without losing the soul. This is the soul contract of Scorpio. To be the sign that faces annihilation and doesn't flinch. To be the soul that loses everything and still remembers its worth. to be the spirit that walks through the fire and walks out glowing. And here's what the world often misses. Scorpio's strength isn't in their walls, it's in their willingness to be undone. That is what makes them powerful, not armor, not control, but the raw, sacred surrender to transformation. The choice to let the old self die, so something truer can rise, and every time they rise, they become less tied to illusion, more aligned with destiny, and more equipped to carry the sacred fire they were born to protect. Because Scorpio doesn't resurrect to return to what was, Scorpio resurrects to rewrite what will be. Conclusion, the lesson of the seer. Now that you've seen Scorpio, not just as a zodiac sign, but as a sacred force walking between worlds, ask yourself, have you been honoring the truths you feel, or have you been silencing them for the sake of comfort? Because Scorpio's path is not about being liked, it's about being aligned. Aligned with truth, aligned with transformation. Aligned with the sacred contract your soul signed before birth. We live in a world addicted to surface, to noise, to shallow connections and easy answers, but Scorpio came to disrupt that, to look past the masks, to listen between the words, to feel what others pretend not to feel, and still love anyway. That is the mark of the true seer, not to destroy what it sees, but to redeem it, to hold the mirror steady, even when it makes people flinch, even when it means walking alone, even when the world misunderstands the silence and calls it darkness, because Scorpio knows what looks like shadow is often just unloved truth. And when that truth is finally sane, finally embraced, finally integrated, that's when healing happens, that's when transformation ignites, that's when souls awaken. So if you are Scorpio, or if you carry that Scorpio energy in your chart, know this: you weren't born to fit in. You were born to see, to awaken, to love with eyes wide open, to walk through endings with dignity, to burn and rise and burn again until only truth remains. That is your gift, that is your burden, and that is your power. And if you've ever wondered why people pull away, why you feel too much, why you sense things no one else notices, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're tuned to a frequency most people are still trying to remember. And if you've carried this knowing in silence, if you've watched the world unravel while staying still in your truth, if you've seen too much and loved anyway, then this message is for you. You are not alone. The seers are rising. The ones who carry the sacred flame, the ones who see what others won't, the ones who feel what others avoid, the ones who remember who they are even in the dark. So stand in your truth, hold your silence with pride. And when the time comes, speak with clarity, speak with power, speak with the force of a soul that has seen the end and chosen to love anyway. That is your legacy, that is your mission, that is Scorpio. If this message stirred something deep in you, if you've ever walked through fire and came back stronger, if you see what others pretend not to see, leave a fire in the comments. Let other Scorpios know you see them, you walk beside them. You are one of them, and don't forget to subscribe to the path to Buddhist wisdom, where truth isn't feared, it's honored.